Welcome students, myself Vishal Pandey, and let us continue the topic which we have taken already, the Russian Revolution. We have already discussed socialism in Russia, and then 1905, a turbulent revolution which just reformed the Russian society as far as the workers are concerned. Let me have a total discussion about the February Revolution in Petrograd. Now, what is Petrograd? I have already told you in the virtual classes. If you remember, Petrograd was the capital of Russia at that time when the First World War and the revolution takes place. So we are here to discuss the February Revolution in detail because it will help you a lot to understand the Russian Revolution in detail. If you talk about the events of February Revolution itself, there are certain points to understand, and you have to understand this to get rid of this revolution so that you can write properly, appropriately in your examination. First point which is important to discuss is in the winter of 1917. If you remember, the First World War had taken place in the year 1914 itself, and Russia was one of the country who had taken active part in that war. So Russia, when the war was at its pinnacle, I'm talking about 1917, Petrograd was grim. Petrograd, as I told you, that it was the capital of Russia. People started gathering, on the periphery of Petrograd, people started gathering in the Winter Palace. Now, what is Winter Palace? Winter Palace was the palace where King Tsar Nicholas II was living at that time. So there was the food shortage. Why people were gathering over there? Because of the food shortage. As I told you that if you fought a war, if your country fought a war, it means, I must say this, that you are suffering from many types of problem. For example, starvation, and then the food shortage, as I can say. If you face a war, your economical condition will become worse. Your food will deteriorate day by day, because ultimately you need food so that your soldier can fight. So what was going in Russia, because of food shortage, the workers, the poor people, the peasants were suffering, and they started gathering, because king is responsible. Today in India you can see that if something happens, the government is responsible. So whenever it was the time period of kings, when kings were ruling at India or at other countries as well, they were responsible before their public. So public was altogether demanding what? Justice and some compensation so that they can move forward in their life. Second point, on the 22nd of February is more important date, because on this particular date people started gathering. If you remember, I have told you in the virtual classes that river Neva, N-E-V-A, plays an important role, because if you remember river Neva, a river has both sides, means left side as well as right side. So at the left side of river Neva, rich peoples used to live. For example, Winter Palace was located at the left side of river Neva. Fashionable peoples were living at the left side of river Neva, and the rich people were living at the left side of the river Neva. The poor people, the workers, peasants, and the factories were set up at the right side of river Neva. So the river Neva was creating a huge margin between rich versus poor. So this was the difference between rich and poor. But people from poverty, they created history by gathering, resembling on 22nd of Feb, a lockout took place at a factory. Workers of 50 other factories joined in sympathy women also led and participated in the strikes. This came to be called as the International Women's Day. Now we celebrate International Women's Day on 8th of March every year. Do you know from where this concept came? This concept came straight away from Russia, from this particular revolution, that is the February Revolution. Women participated in this revolution on a large scale. The large mass gathering was there of women. So because of that, International Women's Day was taken, we celebrate from that year. And you keep this in your mind that at that time Russia was using Julian calendar and we use Gregorian calendar. So this is the difference between, as it was started on 22nd of Feb, International Women's Day, but right now we celebrate on 8th of March. Why? What is the difference between this? When you okay students, so as I was telling you all that International Women's Day, first it was celebrated on 22nd of February according to Julian calendar. If you see from Gregorian calendar, you will find out 13 days ahead, that is 8th of March itself. Now these are certain points. Let us discuss. The government imposed a curfew as the quarters of the fashionable area and official buildings were surrounded by workers. Now workers started gathering in front of Winter Palace, and because king don't want people to gather there, he just ordered his cavalry, his policemen, so the people can be taken away from there. So at that time people went away because of the fearness of policemen. But again on 24th and 25th of February, government called out the cavalry and police to keep an eye on them. People started coming regularly, people started coming day by day, and they just used to वो आते थे और वो पूरे ड्यूमा को या आप कह लें विंटर पैलेस को सराउंड करते थे और वहाँ पे स्लोगन्स बोली जाती थी. सो ऑल द थिंग आई एम सेइंग इज पीपल वर they were very much angry on the you can say the behavior of king or the decisions of king itself. On 25th of February, the government suspended the Duma. What is Duma? Duma is the parliament of Russia. And politicians spoke against this measure. The people were out with force once again. On 27th, the police headquarters were ransacked. Now, let me explain you this paragraph. Politicians were also not happy with Tsar Nicholas II. Why? Because he was continuously dissolving Duma. वो ड्यूमा को रद्द करना एक उनका एक पेशा हो गया था. वो 3 बार ड्यूमा को भंग कर चुके थे. भंग करना मीन्स वो डिज़ोल्व कर चुके थे. इसलिए वहाँ के जो पॉलिटिशियंस थे वो भी खुश नहीं थे किंग के इस डिसीजन से. लेट अस सी व्हाट हैपेंस देन. An officer was shot at the barracks of a regiment, and other regiments mutined, voting to join the striking workers gathered to form a Soviet or council. This was the Petrograd Soviet. Means you can understand by this that all the peoples, it may be a king or some politicians, cavalries, policemen, peasants, workers, etc. and etc. They were all at their ease. They wanted a reformation. They wanted a change into the society. And for that, a delegation went to meet the Tsar. Military commanders advised him to abdicate. People want to meet king himself. People want to meet the commanders of kings, but they were not given the permission. Ultimately, they got the chance to meet the military commanders, and the Tsar abdicated on 2nd March. And the king himself was very much afraid of the people, because people had already revolted against the king himself. A provincial government was formed by the Soviet and Duma leaders to run the country. Now Duma is, as I told you, the parliament of Russia. The politicians, those who were there in Duma, working in Duma, they initiated with a concept and they formed a Soviet as well as Duma, started in collaboration, and they started leading from the front the country Russia itself. So they started leading, and this concept came all of a sudden, and they started making laws and rules and regulations. The people involved were the parliamentarians, workers, women workers, soldiers and military commanders. Who were the people? This is very important you to understand. Who were the people, who were the groups started working under the privilege of Duma as well as Soviet? People involved were the parliamentarians. Parliamentarians means those who were working in Duma, and workers, women workers as well, because I told you that it was the large mass gathering of women as well. So the concept of Women International Women's Day came from here only. So keep this in your mind. Soldiers and military men also participated in that Soviet and that Duma. So let us have the effects. What were the effects of February Revolution? Restrictions on public meetings and associations were removed, because we have a freedom of expression, freedom of speech. That freedom was not there in Russia, but when they abdicated king, when they demolished the throne, when they demolished king himself, the Russian workers and parliamentarians and commanders, what they did first, their restriction on public meetings were removed. Now everyone can meet, have a discussion and talk together. Soviets were set up everywhere. Soviets were set up, I will tell you in detail what is Soviet exactly known as. In individual areas, factories, committees were formed which began questioning the way industrialists ran their factories. Ultimately, you have to know that the conditions of Russia was far better than the condition when the king was ruling and the modern condition when the Soviet and the Duma was ruling. Soldiers' committees were formed in the army. The provincial government saw its power declining and Bolshevik influence grow. It decided to take stern measures against the spreading discontent. Now students, I will be telling you in the next video that what was the Bolshevik movement, October Revolution as well, because it is very important, the October Revolution. So we will be discussing in the next video the October Revolution. But Petrograd Soviet meeting, you can see this portrait. These are the portraits of where the people gathered and the meeting take place. Now in the next video we will start October Revolution. Thank you so much. Watch this video as many times as you can.